The ship was old. Captain Taiho knew every sound it made, every groan of metal and hum of the engines. The Helon was not a beautiful ship. It was not fast or powerful. But it was his, and he loved it the way a farmer loves old land that has fed his family for generations. They were far from Earth now, far from the busy lanes where trading ships moved like rivers of light between worlds. Out here, in the quiet darkness near the Virac Nebula, there was only silence and the cold stars. Taiho sat in his captain's chair and watched the view screen. The nebula filled half the view, a great cloud of red and orange light. Beautiful, he thought. Beautiful and deadly. Ships that went into the Virac Nebula did not come out. Everyone knew this. The radiation storms would cook you alive. The gravity pockets would crush your hull like paper. It was a place of death, and smart captains stayed away. His crew was small. 23 people, all Korean, all volunteers for this long mission to study rocks on dead moons. It was boring work, but it paid well, and Taiho liked boring. Boring meant everyone came home alive. Lieutenant Yuna sat at the communications station, her headphones pressed tight against her ears. She was young, maybe 28, with sharp eyes that never missed anything. Taiho had served with her for 3 years now. She was the best communications officer he had ever known. She frowned. Her fingers moved across her console, adjusting frequencies, filtering noise. Taiho noticed but said nothing. Yuna would tell him if there was something important. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, Yuna pulled off her headphones and turned to face him. "Captain," she said. Her voice was strange. "I am picking up a signal." "What kind of signal?" "An SOS, sir." "Very weak." "Very old." Taiho leaned forward. "How old?" "The signal pattern shows it has been repeating for almost 2 years." 2 years. Taiho felt something cold settle in his stomach. 2 years someone had been calling for help, and no one had come. He stood up and walked to her station, looking at her screens. "Where is it coming from?" Yuna pointed at the view screen, at the great red cloud that filled the darkness. "Inside the nebula, sir." "Deep inside." The bridge went quiet. Everyone heard. Everyone understood what that meant. Chief Engineer Suji looked up from her station. She was a small woman with oil-stained hands and eyes that always seemed to be solving problems. "The nebula is impassable, Captain. Our shields would fail within 6 hours. The radiation would kill us before we got halfway." "I know," Taiho said. Dr. Minho, the ship's physician, stepped onto the bridge. He was older than the others, with gray in his hair and deep lines around his eyes. He had heard the conversation from the medical bay next door. "Do we know who sent the signal?" he asked. Yuna nodded slowly. "I traced the signal code. It matches a ship called the Star of Kindness, a Velith passenger liner. It was carrying refugees from a colony that was destroyed by solar flares. 2,000 civilians, mostly families." "Velith," Suji said quietly. The Velith were not human. They were tall, thin beings with blue-gray skin and large, dark eyes. They were known for being peaceful, artistic, and not very strong. They had no military, no warriors. They built beautiful things and wrote poetry and stayed away from conflict. "The Galactic Council marked them as lost," Yuna continued. "The case was closed 18 months ago. No rescue attempt was made. Why not?" Minho asked. "The report says the mission was statistically non-viable. The chance of success was less than 3%. Taiho was silent for a long moment. He thought about 2,000 people, trapped in that hellish cloud of radiation and fire, watching their supplies run out, watching hope fade, sending a signal that no one answered. He thought about children growing thin and weak, about parents holding them and promising help would come. 2 years. They had waited 2 years. "They might all be dead," Suji said. She was not being cruel. She was being practical. Captain, they probably are dead. And if we go in there, we will die too. Maybe, Taiho said. But maybe not. He looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people. Hard workers. They had families back on Earth, lovers waiting, children they wanted to see again. He had no right to ask them to die for strangers. I will not order anyone to do this, he said. If we go together, because we choose to. I am asking for a vote. If anyone thinks we should not go, speak now. No one will think less of you. The bridge was silent. Then Yuna raised her hand. I vote we go. Suji sighed heavily and raised her hand. Someone has to keep the engines running. Minho smiled sadly and raised his hand. Someone has to patch you up when the radiation hits. One by one, every person on the bridge raised their hand. When Taiho checked with the rest of the ship over the intercom, every single crew member voted yes. 20-3 people. 23 votes. Not one person said no. Taiho felt his throat tighten. He had never been more proud of anything in his life. Thank you, he said quietly. All of you. He returned to his chair and sat down. On the view screen, the nebula waited, red and angry and full of death. Yuna, send a message to the nearest relay station. Tell them what we are doing and where we are going. If we do not come back, at least someone will know we tried. Yes, Captain. Suji, prepare the engines for maximum output. Route all extra power to the shields. We are going to need everything we have. Understood. Taiho took a deep breath. His hands were steady. His heart was calm. He was afraid, but fear did not control him. It never had. Helm, he said. Set course for the SOS signal. Take us into the nebula. The young pilot at the helm, a boy named Yemen with quick hands and quicker reflexes, turned to look at him. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. Yes, Captain, Yemen said. The Huan turned slowly, its old engines groaning with effort. The stars wheeled across the view screen until the nebula was directly ahead, filling the darkness with its terrible red light. Behind them, the safe universe fell away. Ahead, only fire and death and a 2-year-old cry for help. The Hawan flew forward into the storm, and the galaxy watched in silence as 23 humans did what no one else would do. They answered the call. 6 months had passed since the Hewan emerged from the Vrak Nebula with 847 survivors. 6 months of healing and recovery. 6 months of changes that no one could have predicted. Captain Taiho stood on the observation deck of a Vela space station, looking out at the stars. He was healthier now. His body recovered from the radiation damage, though his hair had grown back a little grayer than before. The doctor said that was permanent, a reminder of what he had endured. He did not mind. Gray hair was a small price to pay for what they had accomplished. Behind him, the door opened, and a familiar voice spoke. There you are, Captain. They are ready for you. He turned to see Yuna standing in the doorway, dressed in a new uniform. It was not the simple suit of a survey ship communications officer. It was the uniform of Earth Fleet Command, with a gold pin marking her new rank. She had been promoted 3 times in 6 months. Thank you, Yuna, he said. How are the others? She smiled. Suji is arguing with the engineers about the new ship's design. She says their power distribution system is too simple. Minho is lecturing the medical staff about emergency protocols. Yemen is in the flight simulator, breaking records again. And Hannah? She received her full medical license last week. The youngest human doctor in Earth Fleet history. Taiho felt a warm pride in his chest. His crew, his family, all of them moving forward. All of them growing. Let us go, he said. We should not keep them waiting. They walked together through the corridors of the station. past Velith and humans and members of other species, all working together in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The Velith had declared a formal bond of friendship with Earth, the first such bond they had offered to any species in 1,000 years. Other species had followed, eager to build relationships with the humans who had shown what true strength looked like. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, but it was changing. The ceremony was held in a great hangar, where hundreds of beings had gathered to witness something historic. Taiho walked onto the stage and looked out at the crowd. He saw Velith diplomats and Earth military officers. He saw representatives from a dozen species. All watching with interest and respect. At the front of the crowd sat Elder Vornis, now healthy and strong again. The old Velith smiled when he caught Taiho's eye, and Taiho nodded in return. They had become friends over the past 6 months, meeting often to share stories and learn about each other's cultures. Behind Taiho, filling the hangar with its presence, was a new ship. The Hewan I. It was larger than the original Hewan, built with the best technology humanity and the Velith could provide. Its shields were 10 times stronger. Its engines were faster and more efficient. Its medical bay could handle any emergency. But most importantly, it was designed for one purpose, to answer distress calls across the frontier. An Earth admiral stepped forward to speak. Her name was Admiral Song, and she had personally approved the construction of this ship and the formation of its mission. 6 months ago, she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. A small survey ship did something the galaxy thought was impossible. 23 humans flew into certain death to save strangers. They did not ask for permission. They did not wait for support. They just went. She paused, looking at Taiho. Captain Taiho has been offered admiralty. He has been offered positions of power and influence. He has been offered fame and wealth. He has refused all of it. Do you know what he asked for instead? The crowd waited. A new ship and a crew. That is all. He wants to go back out there and do it again. A murmur ran through the crowd. Admiral Song smiled. Earth Fleet is proud to grant his request. The Hewan 2 will patrol the frontier regions, responding to distress calls that others consider too dangerous. Its mission is simple. When someone calls for help, they will answer. She turned to face Taiho directly. Captain, your ship is ready. Your crew is waiting. Go show the galaxy who we are. Taiho stepped forward and accepted a small data chip from the Admiral, the official orders for his new command. His heart was full in a way he could not describe. Before he could speak, Elder Vornis rose from his seat and walked onto the stage. The Velith moved slowly but with purpose, his dark eyes fixed on the human captain. If I may, Vornis said to Admiral Song, I would like to say something. The Admiral nodded and stepped back. Vornis turned to face the crowd. His voice was old but strong, carrying easily across the hangar. For most of my life, he said, I believed that strength meant power. The ability to destroy your enemies. The ability to take what you want. The ability to survive while others die. This is what the galaxy taught me. This is what I thought was true. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Then I spent 2 years in a dying ship, watching my people fade away, sending signals that no one answered. I learned what true weakness felt like. I learned what it meant to be forgotten. His voice softened. And then the humans came. 23 of them in a ship half the size of ours, flying through a hell that should have killed them a dozen times. They did not come for profit. They did not come for power. They came because they heard us calling. Vornis turned to look at Taiho. The humans taught me something that day, something I will never forget. True strength is not in conquering. It is not in destruction or domination. True strength is in choosing to save others when you could walk away. It is in answering the call when no one else will. It isn't risking everything for people you have never met, simply because they need help. He bowed to Taiho, the same deep bow of respect he had given 6 months ago. Thank you, Captain. Thank you for teaching an old Velith that he still had something to learn. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause filled the hangar, thunderous and genuine, from humans and Velith and members of species that had traveled far to witness this moment. Taiho accepted the bow with humility. He did not feel like a hero. He did not feel like someone who had changed the galaxy. He just felt like a man who had done what he believed was right. After the ceremony, he gathered his crew in the HFY's new bridge. They were all there, his original team plus new members who had asked to join. Yuna at communications, Suji in engineering, Minho in the medical bay, Yemen at the helm, Hannah as the new assistant medical officer, and new faces too. Young men and women from Earth who had heard the story and wanted to be part of something important. Velith volunteers who had asked to serve alongside the humans who had saved their people. Even a few members of other species, curious about these strange creatures who would die for strangers. Taiho looked at them all, his family old and new, and felt a peace settle over him. You all know why we are here, he said. You all know what this ship is for. Out there, somewhere in the darkness, people are in trouble. People who are alone. People who are afraid. People who are sending signals that no one is answering. He smiled. We are going to answer. Yuna spoke up from her station. Captain, I am already detecting multiple distress signals from the frontier region. Mining accidents, ship failures, colony emergencies. The list is long. Then we better get started, Taiho said. Yemen, take us out. Yes, Captain, Yemen replied, his hands moving across the new controls with familiar confidence. The HFY, too, lifted smoothly from the station's hangar, its engines glowing bright against the darkness of space. Through the viewport, they could see the crowd still watching. Velith and humans standing together, waving farewell to the ship that would carry their hopes into the stars. As they passed the edge of the station, the communication system crackled to life. A transmission came through from Elder Vornis. Safe travels, Captain. May the stars guide your path. Thank you, Elder, Taiho replied. Take care of yourself. I will. And Captain, one more thing. Yes? Vornis's voice was warm. When you find the next ship full of people who have lost hope, tell them the same thing you told us. Tell them someone heard them. Tell them help has arrived. Tell them they are not alone anymore. Taiho felt his throat tighten with emotion. I will, he promised. I will. The communication ended, and the HFY too turned toward the frontier. Ahead of them lay the unknown, full of dangers and challenges and people who needed help. Behind them lay a galaxy that was slowly learning a new truth. Humanity was not the strongest species. They were not the oldest or the wisest or the most technologically advanced. But they had something that no other species seemed to have in quite the same way. They had hearts that would not give up. They had hands that would reach out to strangers. They had a voice that would answer when someone called. And that, the galaxy was beginning to understand, was the most powerful strength of all. On the bridge, Captain Taiho settled into his chair and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help. Let us go find them, he said, and the HFY II flew forward into the endless night, carrying 23 humans and their alien friends, ready to answer whatever call came next, because that was what humans did. That was who they were, and the galaxy would never forget it. The edge of the Varrock Nebula was marked by a sudden change in color. The angry red faded to orange, then to pink, then finally to the clean black of normal space. Stars appeared like old friends, steady and calm after the chaos of the storm. On the bridge of the HFY, Captain Taiho watched the nebula fall away behind them, and for the first time in 3 days, he allowed himself to breathe. "We made it," Yuna said softly. She sounded like she could not believe her own words. "We actually made it." Yemen slumped forward over his controls, too exhausted to celebrate. Suji's voice came over the intercom from engineering, rough and tired but filled with relief. "Engines holding steady. Shields are at 12%, but they will recover now that we are out of the radiation." "We made it, Captain." Then Yuna stiffened at her console. "Captain, I am detecting multiple ships ahead." "A lot of ships." Taiho felt a flash of fear. Had they survived the nebula only to face pirates or enemies? But then Yuna's face changed, and she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "They are Velis ships, sir. A rescue fleet. They are hailing us." A Velith face appeared on the view screen. It was Admiral Torvak, the same officer who had watched in disbelief as the Hawan flew into the nebula days ago. His expression was something Taiho had never seen on a Velith before. It was awe. "Human vessel Hawan," Torvak said, his voice formal but shaking slightly. "We are here to assist with the survivors and escort you to safety. On behalf of the Velith people, I must tell you that we did not think this was possible. We did not think anyone would attempt what you have done." Taiho stood up straight, though his body screamed with exhaustion. "Admiral, we have 847 survivors from the Star of Kindness aboard the connected vessel. They need medical attention immediately. Many are in critical condition." "Medical ships are approaching now," Torvak replied. "Your crew will also receive care. We can see from your ship's condition what you have endured." He paused, and his composure broke just slightly. "How did you do this, Captain?" "Our scientists said it was impossible. Our military said it was suicide. How are you still alive?" Taiho considered the question. He thought about Yemen flying for 3 days without sleep. He thought about Suji rebuilding critical systems with salvaged parts. He thought about Minho and Hana treating patients until they could barely stand. He thought about his entire crew, every single one of them, choosing to risk death for strangers. "We are human," he said simply. "This is what we do." The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every major news network carried the story. Every species with access to communications heard about the small human survey ship that had done the impossible. They saw footage from the Hawan's logs, footage that the crew had released so the galaxy would know what had happened. They saw Yemen at the helm, his hands covered in blood and bandages, his eyes never leaving the view screen as he guided the ship through hell. They saw Suji in engineering, covered in grease and burns, holding broken systems together through pure determination. They saw Minho and Hana treating endless streams of patients, collapsing from exhaustion and getting back up to work. They saw Captain Taiho standing on his bridge, making impossible decisions with calm certainty, refusing to leave even one person behind. Species that had never thought much about humans suddenly paid attention. The Morvic, a powerful warrior race that respected only strength, watched the footage with growing interest. The Prill, ancient beings of pure logic, analyzed the human's behavior and found it did not match any rational model. The Sundari, who prized beauty above all else, saw something beautiful in the scarred hull of the Hawan and the exhausted faces of its crew. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from 100 species gathered for an emergency session. The topic was simple. What did this mean? What did it say about humanity? A Morvic counselor named Thren spoke first. He was large even by his species standards, covered in thick scales, with a voice like grinding stone. "I have reviewed the footage," he said, "and I do not understand. These humans have nothing to gain. The Velith cannot offer them anything of value. There was no treaty obligation, no political advantage, no economic benefit. They risked everything for nothing." Ambassador Nari stood. She was Earth's representative to the Council, a woman in her 50s with calm eyes and a quiet voice. She had served in this position for 10 years, patiently building relationships with species that often dismissed humanity as primitive and unimportant. "May I respond, Counselor Thren?" she asked. Thren waved his massive hand. "Please, explain this behavior." Nari walked to the center of the chamber, where all could see and hear her. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, then spoke. "On Earth," she said, "we have a saying. When someone calls for help, you answer. You do not ask what they look like. You do not ask where they are from. You do not ask whether it is convenient or profitable. You simply go." Thren frowned. "That is not logical. Resources are limited. Why waste them on strangers?" "Because they are not strangers," Nari replied. "Not to us. When a Veleth child cries for help, a human hears a child. When a Morvic soldier is wounded on a battlefield, a human sees a wounded person. We do not divide the universe into us and them. We are all just people to us." The chamber was silent. Many of the counselors had never heard a human speak like this. They had assumed humans were just another species, concerned primarily with their own survival and advancement. "This is dangerous thinking," Thren said slowly. "It makes you vulnerable. It can be exploited." Nari nodded. "Yes, it can. And yes, it has been. Our history is full of humans who helped others and were hurt because of it. But our history is also full of humans who were saved because someone chose to help them, expecting nothing in return. We believe that is worth the risk." A Veleth delegate rose from his seat. It was an old male, his face lined with age and grief. He walked slowly to stand before the human ambassador, and then he did something no Veleth had done in centuries. He bowed. Deep and low, the bow of profound respect. "My daughter was on the Star of Kindness," he said, his voice trembling. "She and her children. They are alive because of your people. I cannot repay this debt. I can only say thank you." He remained bowing for a long moment. Then, one by one, other Veleth delegates rose and bowed as well. Then other species. The Prill, who rarely showed emotion. The Sundari, who rarely acknowledged lesser species. Even some of the Morvic, though they bowed stiffly, as if unfamiliar with the gesture. By the end, half the chamber was standing in recognition of what humanity had done. Thren remained seated, watching this display with an unreadable expression. Finally, he spoke again. "I have a question for the ambassador." Nari turned to face him. "Yes, Counselor. If another distress call came tomorrow from a species you have never met, in a place just as dangerous as that nebula, would your people go?" Nari did not hesitate. "Yes, even knowing you might die? Even knowing we might die." Thren stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I think," he said, "that we have underestimated your species." In quiet rooms across the galaxy, in private communications and secret meetings, species began to discuss humanity in a new way. Not as primitive newcomers, not as weak creatures from a wet planet on the edge of nowhere, but as something else entirely, something the galaxy had not seen in a very long time, a species that could be trusted, a species that would come when called, a species whose strength was not in weapons or technology, but in something far more powerful. In hearts that refused to leave anyone behind. On the Helwan, now docked at a Veleth repair station, the crew rested at last. They slept for days, recovering from radiation exposure and exhaustion, healing from injuries and stress. When they finally woke, they found that the galaxy had changed. Messages flooded in from everywhere. Offers of alliance and friendship. Requests for trade agreements. Invitations to join coalitions and councils. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries now wanted to talk. Taiho read the messages with tired eyes, still not fully recovered. He did not understand most of the political implications. He did not care about trade agreements or coalitions. He just knew that when someone had called for help, he had answered, and apparently that meant something. The airlock of the Star of Kindness groaned as it opened for the first time in 2 years. Captain Taiho stepped through first, carrying a flashlight in one hand and a medical kit in the other. Behind him came Hana, Dr. Minho, and 4 other crew members, all volunteers for the boarding party. The darkness inside the Velith ship was complete. The emergency lights had died long ago. The air was cold and stale, and it smelled of desperation. "Hello?" Taiho called out. His voice echoed through the empty corridors. "We are here to help. Can anyone hear me?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the ship, a light appeared. It was weak, barely more than a glow, but it was moving toward them. A Velith emerged from the shadows. He was tall and thin, as all Velith were, but he looked like a skeleton wearing skin. His blue-gray face was hollow, his dark eyes sunken and haunted. He moved slowly, as if every step cost him tremendous effort. Behind him came others. More Velith, in the same terrible condition. Men, women, children. They shuffled forward like ghosts, staring at the humans with expressions of pure disbelief. The first Velith stopped in front of Taiho. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. Tears began to fall from his large, dark eyes, running down his hollow cheeks. "I am Elder Vornis," he finally managed to say. "I have led these people since our captain died. For 2 years, I have told them help would come. For 2 years, I lied to them to keep them alive." He paused, struggling for control. "I stopped believing it myself long ago. But you actually came." Taiho reached out and put his hand on the Velith's shoulder. The gesture was strange between their species, but Vornis did not pull away. He seemed to need the touch, needed proof that this was real. "How many survivors?" Taiho asked gently. Vornis closed his eyes. 847. Out of 2,000. The number hit Taiho like a punch to the stomach. More than half of them had died. Died waiting. Died hoping. Died in the dark and the cold while the galaxy forgot about them. "Show us where they are," he said. "We need to start treatment immediately." The next hours were the hardest of Taiho's life. The survivors were scattered throughout the ship, huddled in small groups for warmth and comfort. They had gathered in the inner compartments where the radiation was weakest, wrapped in blankets and holding each other. Many were too weak to walk. Some were too weak to speak. Dr. Minho and Hana moved through the ship like angels of mercy, treating the worst cases first. Starvation. Radiation sickness. Infections that had spread because there were no medicines left. Injuries that had never healed properly. How did they survive this long? Hana whispered to Minho as they worked on a young Velith mother who was barely breathing. Minho shook his head in wonder. They should not have. By all the rules of medicine, they should have died months ago. But they did not. They refused to die. Hana looked around at the Velith survivors, at their hollow faces and broken bodies, and she understood something important. Humans were not the only species that could endure. When people had something to live for, when they had others depending on them, they could survive things that should be impossible. These Velith had survived for their children, for their families, for each other. She blinked back tears and returned to work. On the bridge of the Star of Kindness, Suji examined the ship's systems with growing frustration. The engines were completely dead. The power core had been drained to nothing long ago. There was no way to fly the ship out of the nebula under its own power. "Can we tow them?" Taiho asked. Suji ran the numbers in her head. Then, on her portable computer, then by hand on a piece of paper, just to be sure. Theoretically, yes, she said slowly. The HFY has enough engine power to pull both ships. But our shields are already failing. Adding the mass of the Star of Kindness will slow us down. It will take twice as long to get out of the nebula. And our shields will not last that long. No, they will not. Taiho was silent for a moment. Then he asked, what if we extend our shields to cover both ships? Suji's eyes widened. Captain, that would spread our shield power even thinner. We would have even less protection. But we would have some protection. And so would they. The radiation exposure would be severe. Some of us might not survive. Taiho looked out the viewport at the red hell surrounding them. He thought about the Velith survivors, too weak to save themselves, depending completely on strangers who had come out of nowhere to help them. Do it, he said. Extend the shields. We are not leaving anyone behind. Suji nodded slowly. She had known he would say that. She had hoped he would say that. I will make it work, she said. Dot back on the HFY. Yemen prepared for the most difficult flying of his life. Towing another ship through the nebula would require constant adjustments, constant corrections. Every movement would have to be perfect. One mistake, and both ships would die. His hands had stopped bleeding hours ago. Yuna had bandaged them, wrapping them carefully so he could still grip the controls. His eyes burned from exhaustion. His body screamed for rest, but he could not rest. Not yet. Not until everyone was safe. The two ships connected, hull to hull, locked together by emergency docking clamps. The HFY's engines roared with effort, straining to move the combined mass. Slowly, painfully, they began to move Dot in the corridors of the Star of Kindness. Velith survivors looked up as they felt their ship shudder back to life for the first time in 2 years. Some of them cried. Some of them laughed. Some just sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what was happening. A young Velith child, no more than 5 years old, approached Hana as she worked. The child was so thin that her bones showed through her skin. She looked up at the human woman with enormous dark eyes. Are you an angel? The child asked in broken common. Hana felt her heart crack open. She knelt down to meet the child's eyes and smiled gently. No, she said. I am just a person. Like you. You came to save us. Yes. Why? Hana did not have a good answer. How could she explain it? How could she tell this child that some people, somewhere, cared about strangers? That some species, among all the stars, still believed in helping those who could not help themselves? Because you needed help, she finally said. And we heard you calling. The child nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense. Then she reached out and took Hana's hand, holding it tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Hours passed. The combined ships crawled through the nebula, shields flickering, engines straining, radiation hammering at them from all directions. Crew members collapsed from exhaustion and were carried to medical, where Minho and his assistants treated them and sent them back to work as soon as they could stand. The Velith watched in amazement. They had heard stories about humans, about these strange soft creatures from a wet planet on the far edge of the galaxy. They had heard that humans were weak, that they could not survive in harsh conditions, that they needed food and water and sleep more than other species. But these humans were not weak. They were tired, yes. They were hurt, yes. They were suffering from the same radiation that had slowly killed so many Velith. But they did not stop. They kept working, kept fighting, kept pushing forward. Elder Vornis found Captain Taiho on the bridge of the HFY, staring at the view screen as if he could push the ship forward with his will alone. Captain, Vornis said, I must ask you something. Taiho turned to look at him. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and his skin had a gray pallor from radiation exposure. but his voice was steady. Ask, why did you come for us? It was the question that had been burning in Vornis's mind since the moment he saw the human ship. The question that made no sense to him, that went against everything he understood about how the galaxy worked. Tahoe was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a tired smile, but a real one. Because you called, he said simply. On Earth, we have a tradition. When someone calls for help, you answer. You do not ask who they are. You do not ask what you will get in return. You just go. Vornis stared at him. In 200 years of life, he had never heard anyone say anything like that. Your people, he said slowly, are very strange. Tahoe laughed, a short, exhausted laugh. Yes, he agreed. We are. Vornis looked at the view screen, at the red fire slowly thinning as they approached the edge of the nebula. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to believe they might actually survive. Thank you, he said. Thank you for being strange. The nebula was worse than anyone had imagined. Within the first hour, the radiation alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across every corridor of the HFY, and the ship's systems fought desperately to keep the crew alive. The shields bent and flickered under the constant assault of cosmic fire. Captain Tahoe stood on the bridge, gripping the railing as the ship shook around him. On the view screen, the universe was red. Not the soft red of a sunset or the warm red of firelight. This was the angry red of burning metal, of superheated gas, of death reaching out with invisible fingers. Shield status? He asked. Suji's voice came over the intercom from engineering, strained but steady, holding at 62%. But we are losing power faster than expected. At this rate, we have maybe 8 hours before they fail completely. 8 hours. The signal was coming from somewhere near the center of the nebula. According to their calculations, it would take at least 12 hours to reach it. Find me more power, Tahoe said. Captain, there is no more power. I have already rerouted everything I can. Tahoe closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and made a decision. Strip the non-essential systems. Life support in the cargo bays, the secondary mess hall, the recreation room. Shut down everything we do not need to survive and fly. That will make things very uncomfortable, sir. Uncomfortable is better than dead. There was a pause. Then Suji's voice came back, quiet but determined. Understood. I will make it work. At the helm, Yemen flew with total focus. His hands moved constantly, making tiny adjustments, dodging pockets of gravity that appeared without warning. Twice, the ship lurched violently as he pulled them away from collapse zones that would have crushed the hull in seconds. He was sweating. His knuckles were white on the controls. But he did not stop. How are you doing this? Yuna asked from her station. She was watching the navigation data and could not understand how anyone could react fast enough to avoid these dangers. Yemen did not look away from the view screen. I do not know, he admitted. I just see where the ship needs to go. I feel it. This was something the other species in the galaxy did not understand about humans. They called it instinct. They called it luck. But it was neither. It was something deeper. Something built into human bodies over millions of years of running from predators and chasing prey across the grasslands of Earth. Humans could push themselves beyond what their minds said was possible. Their bodies could keep working when their brains said to stop. Yemen had been flying for 14 hours straight. Any Velis pilot would have collapsed from exhaustion long ago. Any machine would have frozen, unable to process information fast enough. But Yemen kept flying, kept reacting, kept pulling them through impossible gaps in the fire. In the medical bay, Dr. Minho worked without rest. Crew members came to him with radiation burns, with headaches and nausea, with bleeding from their noses and ears. He treated them as quickly as he could and sent them back to their posts. There was no time to recover. There was no safe place to hide. Every person on the ship had to keep working or they would all die. Minho himself was sick. He could feel the radiation eating at his cells, could feel the weakness spreading through his body. But he did not stop. He could not stop. His crew needed him. A young woman named Hana worked beside him. She was his assistant, trained as a medic, but not yet a full doctor. She was 25 years old and had joined this mission to save money for medical school fees back on Earth. Now, she was fighting to keep her crewmates alive in a storm that wanted to kill them all. "Doctor," she said, her voice tight. "Your hands are shaking." Minho looked down. She was right. He was showing symptoms of radiation poisoning. "So are yours," he said. Hana nodded. She did not say anything else. She just kept working. In engineering, Suji performed miracles. When the primary shield generator started to fail, she rebuilt it using parts from the water recycler. When the hull began to crack in 3 places, she sealed it with emergency foam and welded metal plates over the weak points. When the engines threatened to overheat, she invented a new cooling system using pipes from the heating system and water from the emergency supply. She had not slept in 20 hours. Her eyes burned. Her muscles ached. But every time she thought about resting, she thought about the people on the Star of Kindness who had been waiting for 2 years. If they could hold on that long, she thought, I can hold on a little longer. On the bridge, Yuna tracked the SOS signal through the interference of the nebula. It was hard work. The radiation created noise on every frequency, making it almost impossible to hear anything. But she kept adjusting, kept filtering, kept searching. "I have lost the signal again," she reported. "Find it," Taiho said. "I am trying, Captain." Minutes passed. The ship shook. Warning lights flashed. Somewhere in the lower decks, a crewman cried out in pain as a radiation spike hit him. Then Yuna sat up straight. "I have it. Bearing 347 Mark 12. Distance approximately 200,000 kilometers. Yemen. Adjust course." Adjusting. They flew on, somewhere far away. In a monitoring station on the edge of civilized space, a Velith observer watched the human ship's progress with wide, disbelieving eyes. He checked his readings again and again, certain there must be a mistake. The human ship had been inside the nebula for almost 20 hours. Its shield should have failed long ago. Its crew should be dead from radiation exposure. Its hull should have been crushed by gravity pockets or torn apart by electromagnetic storms. But the ship kept moving. Slower now, struggling, but still moving forward. The observer called his superior, an admiral named Torvak, and showed him the data. Admiral Torvak stared at the screen for a long time. He had served in the Velith fleet for 200 years. He had seen many things, but he had never seen anything like this. "They are flying to their deaths," he said quietly. "For strangers. For people they have never met, who are not even their own species. Why would they do that?" The observer asked. Torvak did not have an answer. On the Hewan, 20 hours became 24. 24 became 30. Crew members rotated through shielded compartments in the center of the ship, taking turns getting brief protection from the radiation while others worked. No one slept for more than an hour at a time. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone was hurting, but no one stopped. Finally, after 32 hours of hell, Yemen saw something on the view screen. A dark shape against the red fire. A ship, drifting, silent, its lights dead, and its engines cold. "Contact," he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "I see them. I see the Star of Kindness." Taiho rose from his chair and walked forward, staring at the view screen. The passenger liner was large, much larger than the Hewan. It was designed to carry thousands in comfort across the stars. Now it floated like a dead whale in an ocean of fire. "Una," he said. "Hail them." Una's fingers moved across her console. She sent the signal and waited. The bridge was silent. Everyone held their breath. Nothing. "Try again," Taiho said. She tried again. Still nothing. "They might all be dead," someone whispered. Taiho shook his head. "Try again." "Keep trying." Una sent the signal a third time. A fourth. A fifth. And then, weak and broken and barely audible through the static, a voice answered. "Is someone truly there?" The voice was not human. It was Velith, speaking in the common language of the galaxy. And it was filled with something Taiho recognized immediately: hope. The desperate, terrified hope of someone who had stopped believing rescue would ever come. Taiho picked up his communicator. His hands steady despite his exhaustion. "This is Captain Taiho of the Earth vessel Hewan," he said. "We are here. We received your signal. We have come to take you home." The line was silent for a long moment. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it was breaking with emotion. 2 years, the voice said. "We waited 2 years. And someone actually came." Taiho smiled tiredly. "Hold on a little longer. We are coming to get you."